Hello and welcome to the 25th 2020 NHL Draft recap here at Scouching. Today we're going to be looking at the New York Islanders. Now, the New York Islanders are a team that overall in the last few years hasn't necessarily drafted, at least outside of the first round, what I would call well, but I wouldn't say that it's been a complete failure of management in terms of the players they've brought into their universe. But in 2020, I really have trouble with a lot of their draft class overall. Leading the way at 90th overall, they took Alexander Ljungcrantz. Now, Ljungcrantz is not a bad hockey player, but I did not see him particularly often this year. Whenever I did see him, I never came away thinking that he was so much of a needle mover outside of straight line goal scoring that really led me to believe that at 90th overall, this is the most valuable player you could take. I guess if you end up with a complimentary goal-scoring winger there, then there could be value here at 90th overall for the Islanders. But I really struggled to really figure out what the line of thinking was behind Ljungcrantz here. This is a team that also went to the Swedish Junior League and drafted Simon Holmstrom in the first round last year, so something they see in these Swedish players does seem to resonate with their organizational philosophy. I don't really know what exactly that is, but Ljungcrantz is a capable goal-scoring offensive player, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. And you can let him develop for a few years, but I didn't think that at 90th overall that Ljungcrantz would be a player that was extremely high on my personal list. At 121st, they went to the prep school circuit and took Alex Jeffries. I like Alex Jeffries. He's skilled, he's shifty, he's got dual threat offense. I still just am naturally skeptical of prep school hockey players. I think that if you're going to pick a prep school hockey player, he was probably one that would be near the top of my list. I don't know if I would have picked him at 121, but I can't really complain here. I like Jeffries quite a lot, but I'm also just naturally skeptical of the world that he comes from. He's a late 2001 born kid who's heading to Merrimack College, which historically is not the highest level college program in the United States, but you can let him develop for a few years. I would just hope that for a player born in November playing prep school this year as a scoring winger, that he hits the ground running and doesn't need the full 4 years to develop in college. But like I said, if you're gonna bet on a prep school guy this year, he probably would have been the guy that came to my mind immediately. At 152nd, the Islanders took William Dufour, and this is a team that has the most expensive fourth line in the entire league. So I look at this team and what they value in terms of what they will put on their bottom six and see the same kind of things out of William Dufour. He's a big kid who can really move, and he plays hard and generates points from right around in front of the net, whether it's through his passing or just getting in front of the net and getting the greasy goals that always seem to be important around NHL playoff time. I think William Dufour could be a really interesting bottom six player if things go well for him in the NHL. I certainly think he slipped a little bit further than I would have hoped. I think this is a perfectly reasonable pick for the Islanders, if not the highest ceiling potential option at 152 they could have taken. He's a solid, powerful, physical player with some decent offensive tools, so we'll see where his game goes in the next little while. I'm optimistic for him to be at least some kind of player that can push for an NHL role down the line based on his natural tendencies, but I'm not expecting huge things out of Dufour in the future. At 183, the Islanders took Matias Rakaniemi, and now I look at Matias Rakaniemi and go, big kid who can skate okay and plays defense just fine at the under 20 level. He's extremely young for this year's draft class. He's already getting some reps in the Liga for Pelicans, and I think that he's a reasonable defense first player. I have nothing negative to say about Rakaniemi, but whenever I've seen him play, which was a few times this year, I never saw anything overwhelmingly positive. I think Rakaniemi's going to be one of these players who you just never notice is in your lineup, for all the right reasons though. I don't really expect him to be an NHL player because I don't really think there's enough there now that really allows him to be projected into the NHL, at least today, but I think it's entirely possible based on his natural cerebral tendencies, shutting down defensive plays, preventing danger from in front of the net, and just being a capable player when getting pucks to teammates who can move the puck up the ice. I don't expect huge things out of Rakaniemi or a guy like Dufour, for example, but I do think that there is a potential trajectory for these players to be guys in the NHL that you have in your lineup for a little while. And then at 214, they took Henrik Tikkanen, a 6'8" goaltender born in the year 2000, playing in the Finnish Junior League, and as a well under 900 save percentage goaltender. I don't know. I feel like this pick is kind of wasting a pick on just a goaltender who is 6'8", and I do think there is a bit of an upper limit for goaltenders in terms of size and overall effectivity, especially when you consider how big and long these muscles are and how quickly these goaltenders need to move in the NHL. But nothing is impossible. Pekka Rinne wasn't particularly a highly valuable player when he was drafted, so maybe there's a future for him. He's playing in the Mestis this year so far and is struggling to hit a 900 save percentage, but it's still early in the year, so who knows. I don't, Most people probably don't either, but they have a really good goaltending development program in New York there, so maybe there's something they can extract out of him over the next few years. So I don't really think there's much to really say about this pick. I wouldn't have taken him. I think there were some really good players that went undrafted, but he's a 6'8" goaltender, and he's already pretty well developed, so if you think you got something in a couple of years, then great. So for the New York Islanders, I have a really hard time accurately evaluating them, but I'm going to give them a 4A. Now, a 4A isn't terrible. I think someone like an Alex Jeffries has an interesting trajectory. I look at Dufour and Rakaniemi and could see interesting NHL role players, and if you come out of the NHL draft with a fourth-line role player and a bottom-pair defenseman who can kill penalties like someone like Rakaniemi, then maybe you've had yourself a successful draft. I don't expect enormous things out of any of the players that the Islanders drafted, but Ljungqvist and Jeffries show interesting offensive skill in a different set of ways, and Dufour and Rakaniemi have interesting projectable traits, and Henrik Tikkanen is a huge goaltender, so who knows? If they end up with something, great. I just feel like there was a lot of really spread out talent that was about around the same level throughout the entire draft for the New York Islanders this season. So that's all for the New York Islanders recap. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to a Discord server, early access to videos, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies, or you can get some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all for the Islanders, and join me in the next one where we look at the world-famous Carolina Hurricanes.